Welcome everyone. The time's now 7 p.m. and I will open this evening's agenda briefing forum. This evening is not a decision-making forum, it is a briefing on the agenda for the Ordinary Council meeting which will be held next Tuesday, the 27th of June 2023. I'd like to remind everyone in the chambers to ensure the comments are respectful to the Council and all meeting attendees, including city officers and those in our public gallery. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Item 3 is announcements, of which there are none this evening. Item 4 is attendance. Councillor Clark has provided an apology for tonight's meeting and Councillor Bull is attending by electronic means. All other councillors are present in the chamber. Item 5, disclosures of interest. Councillors, do you have any interest to disclose? None. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is deputations. And this evening we have 3 in-person deputations. I'll just explain how the process will work. Each person who is presenting will be invited to come forward and speak at the microphone for up to 5 minutes. Please state your name. As we get close to 5 minutes, I'll let you know so that you can conclude your deputation. Once you have finished, councillors may have some questions for you. So our first deputation is in relation to item 10.4.3, Maylands Brickworks Community Engagement Outcomes and Business Case. We have Josie Ganane Della, who has submitted a written deputation but will also like to speak to the item in opposition of the officer's recommendation. Please come forward.
Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Josephine Ganane Della. I live at 7 Swanbank Road, Maylands, so in the street with the... You okay? Oh, not good. For the ins. That's nice.
Are we
Shall I continue?
okay?
Okay. I actually live in the same street as the Brickworks, so it's very dear to my heart, and I'm a member of Friends of Maylands Brickworks. I'll read not every word, but similar to what I've written in the submission, okay? So once more, the future of the Maylands Brickworks is to be discussed. It was understood by me and others the future had been decided. I refer you to the minutes of the 2019 council minutes. Why is the council trying to change or reverse the decision? It's one of my questions. Since the handover from City of Stirling of the Brickworks to the City of Bayswater in 1998, I believe, there hasn't been, as far as I am aware, any real maintenance of the brickworks and has fallen further into disrepair. The brickworks are very important to the history of Maylands and of Perth, not just Maylands but of Perth. The kiln is the only remaining Hoffman kiln in WA. The bricks made there have been used in many historical buildings in Perth. More information can be sourced at the historical group if you really want to find out any more about the history of the kiln. If a commercial development goes ahead, the area will be decimated. As a resident of Swanbank Road, I have very strong concerns about traffic now. I've spoken and sent emails to the council about this on several occasions, but to no avail. If there's a commercial development there, private houses, commercial development, there will be many more cars, and I fear this will prompt a further drive to open up the walkway which currently begins at the golf course around to the police buildings. The amount of wildlife which live in that area will be killed or starved out. I'm not sure if all councillors are aware of the walkway and how it is utilised by the wildlife and people. In the winter edition of the Bayswater Brief on page 5, your publication I should say, the article is about partnering with Murdoch University to protect the snake-necked turtle in the City of Bayswater. The lakes at Maylands are actually mentioned in this article. So there is a drive to preserve the wildlife. I feel with more traffic and more buildings, they're going to be more of a risk, and they could be killed or starved out. I am concerned about the heritage site Maylands Brickworks being destroyed, and by putting a commercial enterprise there, it will require more infrastructure. As I mentioned before, maybe making the walkway between where the golf course is and the police station or police buildings into a road. And also there'll be parking, there'll be traffic. Why is it that there is a need for money, if there is a need for money for the council, why you're not looking at other alternatives in other parts of the Shire? The community over many years has expressed a desire to maintain the brickworks. If you look at the history of the Maylands area, my understanding is that Mayor Alma Venville was very proactive in maintaining that area and looking after it as a historical area. I ask the councillors here to do the same, to look at it and keep it for future, as Alma Venville did. Ooh, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask if there are any questions from councillors. No, thank you for your deputation. Our next deputation is in relation to the same item, 10.4.3, Maylands Brickworks Community Engagement Outcomes and Business Case. And we have John Della, who has submitted a written deputation, but would also like to present in person in opposition to the officer's recommendation. Please come forward.
Good evening all, and thank you for allowing me to touch on this item. It's very much in line with what my wife had just said. Now, I also wish to advise my concerns regarding the council pushing for reversal of the decision to protect the brickworks from the commercial or private development. Brickworks, as has been mentioned, are an important historical site. The park around the brickworks are also an important part of the ecosystem of the lakes, which is important to, obviously, with the wildlife around the parks, lakes, and is in danger of being lost to more development. Also refer to the article in the Bayswater thing there regarding the snake-necked turtles. We quite often, when we go walking during their nesting time and that, we see them and we sometimes have to move them back towards the lake so they're not run over by push bikes or things like that. So they are very active in that area. I do not support the council selling of heritage site or for a private development. This will affect also, as I've mentioned, the wildlife and its habitat and a loss of important heritage site. My question to the council is, why aren't other areas within the Bayswater Council being utilised to raise finance? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask if there's any questions. No, thank you very much for your deputation. Our next deputation is in relation to the same item, item 10.4.3, Maylands Brickworks Community Engagement Outcomes and Business Case. Mr. Steve Mathers has submitted a written deputation, but would also like to speak in opposition to the officer's recommendation.
Good evening all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm writing to express my deep concern and strong approval regarding the recently announced proposal by Council to investigate options for selling part of the Maylands Brickworks sites to a developer for the purpose of residential development in order to secure third-party funding for the repair and rehabilitation of the brickwork kiln and the associated minor structures. Most would agree that this magnificent brickworks kiln is worth saving. It's one of a handful of Hoffman kilns remaining in Australia. The kiln and its associated clay pits have been the geographical backbone of the southern part of the Maylands Peninsula for the last 100 years. The site was a critical hub for brick production in West Australia, contributing to the growth and development of the state. And the modern suburb of Maylands is intrinsically defined by and linked to the brickworks and the adjacent lakes that were formed by landscaping the clay pits in the original subdivision development circa 1998. The brickworks site contributes to the cultural identity of the local community, both as a site for rest and recreation. It fosters civic pride and a sense of place. It is a unique symbol of the area that we call home. I note the proposal to sell the part of the site was not an option proposed by or even considered by the Community Reference Group instigated by Council, I think it was last year, as part of the community consultation process in which my wife participated in good faith. I further believe that any future referral to the Community Reference Group of an option to part sell the site for residential development will not be supported by a large majority of community members. This process has been very opaque from a community perspective, and I'll be submitting the following questions for question time at next week's meeting. Number 1, noting the restoration works currently underway on the Ascot Beehive kiln facility for which state government has responsibility, what formal steps have been taken by council to seek funding from the state government under the guise of heritage protection? Number 2, have any studies been undertaken by council to confirm that sufficient funding could be obtained via this course of action, and what minimum portion of site would need to be offered up for the sale for this option to be viable? Number 3, whether the council is aware and prepared for the magnitude of penalties involved under state law in allowing heritage listed facilities, for which this council is ultimately responsible for, to degrade to the point of collapse. And number 4 is the decision to formally rezone the park area between Brickworks Lake and Peninsula Road from residential R40 to public open space, which was previously supported by this council, also now open to review and reversal as part of this proposal. Thank you for your time in this important matter.
Thank you very much for your deputation. I'll just ask if there are any questions from councillors. No, thank you very much. So councillors, we've also received several written deputations on this item. There have been 19 submitted in relation to item 10.4.3, Maylands Brickworks. And we also have, on a separate item, 2 written deputations have been submitted in relation to item 11.2, Councillor Ellie Peterson-Pick rezoning Sherwood Reserve to an public open space by Lois Moyer and Nat Ladder. All of these have been provided to councillors and are available on the city's website, and I'll take those as read. So we'll now move on to item 7, questions on agenda reports. First, we'll ask questions on items that were the subject of deputations, and Councillor Peterson-Pick, you've advised that you have a question in relation to item 10.4.3, Maylands Brickworks. So, yeah, if you'd like to go ahead first.
Thank you. Several questions, please. Start. So I think that this is one of the questions that we just heard from one of the deputies about the public open space next to the Maylands Brickworks. Is the suggestion to look into selling part of the site also covers that area of the public open space?
I'll go to the director to respond.
Through the chair, no, there's no intention to do that.
Thank you. On page 47 of the agenda, the top paragraph, the officers are advising that the recommendations from the community reference group are considered reasonable in the context of the community expectations for the site and the availability of funding or the lack thereof. So my question is, if those recommendations are considered reasonable, why is the recommendation now to deviate from what their recommendations suggested? Why are we doing that if we identify that their recommendations are reasonable, even taking into account the availability of funding?
Thank you. I'll go to the director to respond.
Yeah, thank you. I might get the manager to respond to that, please. Thanks.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The city has looked at the outcomes of the CRG's recommendations and also the council resolution from 2019 relating to clauses 4 and 5, where we were required to seek further information through a business case and options to progress the restoration and conservation of the site. As part of that process, obviously the outcomes of the business case and the options to conserve different parts of the site have resulted in significant amounts of money, of which there is no funding available in the upcoming budget or in the long-term financial plan to date. So essentially, the business case has looked at a number of methodologies to conserve aspects of the building. The funding streams which have been talked about as part of the CRG aren't necessarily of a high enough calibre to be able to meet those conservation costs. So the question is to the council to consider how best to be able to decide which parts of the site they wish to conserve and which parts are not necessarily reasonable to retain.
Thank you, Manager. Just a follow-up question on this one, because it wasn't clear to me. So again, on that, in the report, the officers are advising that the group's recommendations are considered reasonable even when it comes to the availability of funding. So are you saying that is not the case? Their recommendations are not reasonable when it comes to funding? I'm just want to know about the advice that in the report at the top, because it does mention in writing that their recommendations are reasonable. If they are not reasonable, it's good to know. It will be good to know that. I just want to know if it's accurate or not accurate, and if they are reasonable, why we are looking into something else.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the officers' comments talk about the community expectations and the availability of funding or lack thereof for the various scenarios for the site. The city's consultant who undertook the business case advised the city's officers that the funding streams available to the city are not of the calibre required to be able to undertake those expectations that the community have. So the city has previously been in partnership discussions with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. Unfortunately, that joint venture didn't progress. So we now have to look at other funding streams. The business case goes into a number of different discussions around funding, Lottery West, some other significant sites across the metropolitan area, which may be case studies. But the advice that he's provided to the city is that it's unlikely that we would be able to secure the millions of dollars required to be able to conserve the building to meet the expectations of the community.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question on this. So will that analysis also covers election commitments? So is the consultant saying that it is unlikely that the state or the federal government will ever give the city any election commitment, or it's more about the grants that are available and election commitments are aside?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the business case looks primarily at state government funding, which has been explored before and it didn't eventuate. It's not clear at this point in time that that is a positive avenue that the city would get a good outcome from, given that we've been through that process before. The council resolved to discontinue that relationship and that process. Election commitments are something which obviously the CEO and Mayor can look into and have done so quite recently that I'm aware of. But the business case obviously can't predict what the outcomes of those sort of discussions are.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up question. So the Escott Kilns, the City of Belmont, they received $6 million from the state government to repair the Escott Kilns. So my question when it comes to funding, how they were able to be eligible for that, but as you're advising us, our site will not be eligible for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually spoke to the City of Belmont today. The Ascot Kilns is a state government-owned asset,
Yep.
and the state government put forward the $6 million to restore those kilns. So it's not owned by the City of Belmont. It's a state government project.
So the state government were able to provide money for that because it was their site.
Because it's their asset, that's right.
Thank you. Another question, if I can. On same page 46 at the top, it talks about, there is a paragraph under 2, the city is intending the stabilization of the property be addressed in the long-term financial plan. Has this been addressed in the long-term financial plan? The draft that we are going to vote on tomorrow?
I'll go to the director, acting director.
Through the chair, from the discussions we've had regarding the long-term financial plan, we have to go through all the projects, including this project, to find out where they rate in priority and which ones we can and can't afford through the long-term financial plan. So this one hasn't been included in the long-term financial plan at this stage.
So it's not included. Thank you. On page 50, the report is talking about, in the middle, under business case recommendations, that the business case recommends that in the short term, the city progress with conservative package 2 detailed above, which is consistent with the CRG recommendation. So my question is, and I think it's following up from the previous questions, so the business case does recommend a specific option, the package 2, which is consistent with the CRG. So my question is why that is not a recommendation from the officers to proceed with package 2, which is what the city is saying that was the recommendation from the consultants in the business case, in the middle of page 50 under business case recommendations.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Peterson-Pitt, could you just,
Yes,
I have
please.
a different version.
I'm happy to repeat.
If you
And
can just-
so on our page 50, there is a headline called business case recommendations.
So I think it's just page 100 in the hard copy.
Okay. Just before the funding headline.
Yep.
It's kind of half a page before the legislative compliance bit.
Yes. And sorry, your question?
My question is the first sentence that the officers wrote, the business case recommends that in the short term, the city progress with conservative package 2 detailed above. So my question, if that is the recommendation from the consultants that worked on the business case, why isn't this the recommended approach? And package 2 is consistent with the CRG as well. So we have the CRG, we have the package 2. So my question is, why that is not the recommendation and we're going with something that was not recommended by the consultants in accordance with the report?
Through you, Madam Mayor, because there aren't available funds in the budget or the long-term financial plan, and they haven't been set aside. So the options are to look at alternatives.
Thank you. My final question, if I can. So if council does not support the officer's recommendation, what will be the alternative? What will the city suggest as the alternative? What is the other option for the council? If it's not that, what would have been the other option?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the city's officers have made a recommendation. We would seek council's consideration on what alternative they see as appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item, councillors? No. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, of which was we had a deputation, is 11.2. Councillor Peterson-Pitt rezoning Sherwood Reserve to a public open space. No one's indicated they have any questions on this item, but are there any? No? Okay. So, councillors, that's all I've been made aware of in terms of questions. Would anyone else like to Raise any other questions on any other items? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, thank you, and apologies, I missed the deadline today for raising questions. I had one about the financials, and it's very, very general and broad. It's really about the trends in the finance. So we see in the financial report that our income is 3% higher than budgeted.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson, which item?
Oh, sorry, 10.2 point something. My apologies. Yeah, possibly. I think it's more 10.2.1.2.
You mean 10.2.2? There's no 10.2.1.2.
Oh, sorry.
10.2.2, the investment report.
No, it starts executive summary for the period blah, blah, blah to the 31st of May. So I'm sorry, I'm struggling to... I've got 10.2.1.2 on the top of my screen, but...
Okay, we think it's the financial report for the period ended 31st of May.
Yes, sorry, I'm
Okay,
looking at the attachment,
10.2.1.
so my apologies. Thank you. In the summary, it says that our income is 3% higher than budgeted and our expenses are 89% of what was budgeted. Just wondering if, and that's largely because the fees and charges were higher than anticipated, and our expenses are lower. I think it largely says we have $1.9 million lower in wages because of unfilled positions. And that leaves us with, correct me if I'm wrong, a $6.5 million surplus predicted in this year. Is that right? And so I guess that's my general question. Is that my correct reading of that? And also, is that trends about income and wages expected to continue into next financial year?
Thank you. I'll go to the acting director to respond.
What you're referring to year to date, up until the end of May, might be correct, but obviously we've got June to get through yet, and in June we do have a lot of accruals, year-end accruals, obviously, and then we get audited. So it's a lot of transactions to be done yet through June and July in relation to the year. So in terms of the surplus, we're not looking at getting a $6.5 million surplus at all, or near that. You're just looking at particularly how we're going up until the end of May. Clearly, with employee costs, we do have a lot of year-end accruals to do, long service leave, annual leave, areas like that. So although we will finish under budget with employee costs, I can't tell you exactly how much, but we'll be comfortably under budget. I think fees and charges, we should be over budget at the year end, but again, it's very difficult to say exactly how much at this stage. It's still, although we're late in the year, we still have all of June, and like I said, a lot of all the year-end accounting transactions to do in July, so I probably can't really give a more clear indication than that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item, councillors? Any questions on any other items on the agenda?
I did have a question about something that's in the confidential.
Okay, so what we'll need to do... Okay, and it relates to the confidential. Yep. Yes? Okay, so what we'll need to do is, sorry, members of the gallery, if we could please ask you to leave. No, we'll be finishing after this. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll close the agenda briefing forum at 7:30. Thank you, councillors. Okay.